Hello and welcome to another episode of our Brothers Creed podcast,
where we inspire fathers to build the blueprint for the next generation.
We are the Thomas brothers. I'm Jared.
And I'm Ethan.
Okay, so Ethan, I was thinking about doing a little game here. We need to introduce our audience to our wives. And how about this? You just do a 30-second introduction of Kaytlin, the best introduction you can give, and then I'll do a 30-second introduction of Shannon, just so that our audience gets to know our wives a little bit better. Go.
All right, I will go first. 30 seconds. So this is Kaytlin Thomas. She is my better half.
Make sure you wave, Kaytlin, for those watching.
Yeah. Kaytlin and I have been married for this will be 13 years this year, and we have 4 kids. One thing that Kaytlin, I value her opinion, especially in these conversations about fatherhood, which is what we're going to be talking about. Kaytlin is a person that she is very vigilant as to when she perceives that she might have offended or in her mind made a mistake, whether it's with myself or with the kids. And she is very quick to apologize. And we're talking about kids, so I'll specifically kind of go on that. But I think that it's a great time for us to sit down together, Jared and I, with our wives, and just kind of hear their thoughts on these amazing children that they physically brought and we supported to help bring into this world, and hear not only how we can be better as fathers, maybe some of the right things that we did, but also just, how can we support these amazing kids? So that is my wonderful wife. And
okay, I'll add on a few things because I think you missed a few things. I just wanted to add specifically that Kaytlin was the creative artist behind our logo. Ethan and I had an idea of what it would be, and then she's a great graphic designer, a great photographer. She's a great mother. Just amazing. I feel like a trumpet all the way. I just like
nothing you've ever seen.
Like unbelievable, a big league. And so Kaytlin is great, and we appreciate her and her creativeness.
Thank you.
She's awesome.
All right, Jared, your turn.
All right, so I'm married to the beautiful Shannon Thomas, and we've been married for 15 years, almost 15 years. So we're like next level status here, I guess. Big 1-5. We've got 4 kiddos, 4 boys. Shannon is from Colorado, and she is a full-time stay-at-home mom extraordinaire. She does all kinds of stuff for our family. It's unbelievable. Most recently, she's been into making sourdough bread, which is really hard when you're trying to cut weight for a competition. She's does a great job of feeding our boys, and she's a great cook. She's an excellent cook. She actually runs a small cookie business that she makes cookies and sells them called Goody Vibes Only. Hashtag, check it out on Instagram. She's also...
It's very sporadic.
It's very sporadic, but it's very good. If you're local to the Charlotte area, you can hit her up and for some... she'll make some excellent cookies for your event.
They really are some of the best cookies you'll ever eat.
Thank you. It's true. Thank you. They are good.
Shannon is also very creative, just like Kaytlin. Shannon actually started a podcast with her sister, Nicole, recently called The Late Over Podcast, which you can find that on Spotify and also in other avenues. So make sure you give them a 5-star review and a positive comment, and also follow them on Instagram. So they're great. They have some great content they come out with. So I take full 100% credit for any success that she has as a podcaster. No, she's doing great. She'll probably surpass us in no time.
We have very different content.
If she hasn't already.
Very different audience. So
yes,
it's yeah. Well, thank you. That was so nice.
But we want to make sure you guys got a proper introduction before we dove into the meat of the issue, or meat of the content here. Okay, today we have a very special episode where we've invited two of the most special ladies that we know in our whole lives, and that is Ethan and I's wives, Kaytlin and Shannon Thomas, the Thomas ladies. Welcome.
The Thomas women.
Thank you.
Very happy to be here.
We're very excited to have you on, and we've come to a culmination of our stages of fatherhood here. We've gone through all 6 stages. Ethan and I have done that over a couple different episodes. And we thought it would be really cool to get our most important ladies on who we're parenting with, we're raising all these kids with, to really get a sense of, from the female perspective, what these stages of fatherhood mean and some of the good things, and also maybe some of the not so good things from a female perspective. So thank you both very much for joining us today and taking the time.
So as Jared said, we're going to be walking through those stages, and I'll kind of do a quick precursor to what those stages are, and then we can start walking through. But as Jared said, we did kind of 3 episodes of breaking these down personally and what our thoughts on them were. Some of them we've been through, some of them we're currently in, and some of them we have not yet reached. But we're just excited to talk through it. And a couple of things kind of beforehand, we asked Kaytlin and Shannon to come on with maybe like one thing that they would like to see from a father, and then maybe something that they would not like to see from a father. You could say a good thing and a bad thing or whatever for each of these stages. Now, one thing that I told Kaytlin is I was like, I'm not going to take offense by any of these things that you say, right? These are not like a judgment on Jared and I as fathers, right? Just because you say a father should do this or shouldn't do that doesn't mean that Jared and or I did or did not do such thing.
But sometimes we did learn lessons. And there was a couple of occasions where we said, man, I wish I would have done more of this, or we gave advice on things that we might have done wrong, or we wish we would have done better. So
yeah.
sometimes,
So some of those good things,
some
of those good things, I'm sure Jared and I did. Maybe some of the good things we're like, oh man, we should have done that. So it'll definitely be interesting. And Jared and I, when we were kind of putting our thoughts together on this, we're just like, man, it'd be good to kind of get a different perspective. And some of the things might be very similar to what we said in our, as we were going through it in the podcast. So maybe there's some things that you agree with us on. I'm sure there are. So the different stages that we're going to be going through are the first stage, which is the anticipation stage. This is anything that's pre-birth. The next stage is the new father stage. So this is kind of 0 to 2 years old in that baby stage. The third one is the hands-on stage, which is early childhood from about 3 to 7 years old. Next one is the role model stage, which is that 8 to 12-year-old. The next one is the guide stage, which is 13 to 19, really that teenage age. Then number 6 would be the mentor stage, which is 20 plus. There's a lot going on in a person's life, 20 plus. And then the last one is the grandfather stage. Jared and I have kind of maxed out the stages in stage 4 right now with the 8 to 12, the role model stage. So after that,
as fathers, but we are in the receiving stage of the other stages. So we've actually got experience in all these stages, in the receiving or giving capacity.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm gonna be taking notes on these last couple stages as I go into those. I'm like, oh hey, Kaytlin says that she likes this and don't do this. So, so it'll be good.
So should we get started with we got a lot of, I'm sure these ladies have a lot of good stuff to share, and we want to give this some good time. So let's start with the first stage, the anticipation stage, or pre-birth. Maybe let's go. Let's hear some of your good things first, and then we'll hear from each of you about maybe some of your cautionary items for this stage. Let's have Kaytlin. Let's have you go first on this one. What are your thoughts?
So I think the first one for me is just kind of like, as a husband, just be so understanding. There's a lot just happening in a body of a woman during pregnancy that she's not always going to make sense. And there's going to be a lot of emotions that happen. And you are going to think you married a complete psycho probably half the time that they're pregnant. Like there's a whole lot that goes on. And so just know that it's not always well, hopefully the crazy doesn't stay like for too long, but just to be understanding and realizing like she is going through something that literally you will never be able to understand or even like go through yourself. And so just trying to be patient and kind, I think is a huge one. Which Ethan was very patient and kind because I was a crazy person.
You don't have to say that, but thank you.
So yeah.
That's good. Thank you. Thanks, Shannon. Let's. What were some of your thoughts? I imagine some of that you will echo as your sentiment as well.
Yes, I definitely agree. I think that pregnancy is a really good time for a husband to practice taking care of someone before it's such high stakes like a baby. And I think that if we raised boys with that type of understanding, rather than like, well, wife's pregnant, we have 9 months to get our lives together. I think the ship is kind of, you have time to get stuff together for the baby and maybe get mentally stuff, but like your wife is gone. And I think women don't understand that either until, really, I didn't understand it until I was done having kids. But that pregnancy test is positive and you have a little baby in an adult woman and as an adult woman that you need to take care of and totally baby like she is a baby. And I think that nurturing her is really good practice for becoming a dad. And it is so hard. You're so sick. You feel like, I remember crawling up the stairs and crying halfway up because I couldn't finish going up the stairs. I wasn't even 9 months pregnant. I was just so tired. I wanted to die. And no one prepares you for that. And then when you say that, you sound idiotic. Like, okay, it was 5 stairs. Come on, get it together. So I think that if you can enter it like so gently with just, I have low expectations as one of my very like themes in basically all of these stages, but just very low expectations. And then like over take care of her. If she says she's fine, she probably isn't. And
force her to eat.
yeah, force her to eat. But yeah, I think that it's just really good practice to get into the mode of nurturing. Almost like at the end of pregnancy, when you wake up a lot, it's like teaching you to wake up for the baby. It's kind of the same thing. There's probably not a lot of other times in a man's life where he, prior to becoming a dad, that he really has to do a lot of nurturing. And I think that is something critically important.
I love it. I think it's good.
I remember one thing that Kaytlin had as the pregnancies went on, right? Especially the last two, you would just get these like just shooting like bone pains in your like pelvis and hips. And I remember like the last like almost 2 months or a month of being pregnant, you like had to walk around with crutches because it was just so painful. It's just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, good times.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
We're not here to reminisce.
Yeah, you don't have to do that again.
Never.
You don't. Never
and
again.
just think, it all started with shooting bone pains. So. No, I think that's totally right. I mean, I feel like taking care of a woman is something that's, it's easier than changing a diaper. Feeding a baby is a lot easier, is a lot harder, more complex than running to the grocery store to get your wife pickles in the middle of the night or whatever she's craving.
You never did that.
I
never made you do that.
No, I didn't do that. But we did. You were craving Bojangles chicken, and we ate I went and got a lot of Bojangles. You
Mine
were
wasn't so much cravings.
big
It was
on
just
those
the
thighs.
only thing I could eat.
Yeah, well,
That was
that's
if there was one
potato
thing on the
potato.
menu. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We did have a lot of Bojang.
For sure. Very good. So let's hear some of the cautionary tales, which might just be the inverse of whatever you guys just said, but maybe you guys have other ideas as well. Let's maybe go with Shannon, and then we'll go back to Kaytlin.
Okay. I just kind of the same thing, keeping expectations low. I think that treating a pregnant woman like she is not pregnant or having expectations for her that you might think is reasonable. I think that she will communicate to you the things that are reasonable and the things that aren't in so many words. And I think picking up on that and understanding, I do think there's an art to that because, like Kaytlin said, like a woman's never gone through this before and everything is new and you have an alien in your body. But I think, I mean, of course, don't make her feel bad in any way. I mean, her body's changing. She knows it. Everybody knows it. She feels horrible. And I mean, there's a million things that are bad. And so even the tiniest thing of judgment or just be so kind. But I can't really think of anything, I mean, other than like outright abuse that is like, okay, well, duh, you should do that to a pregnant woman. But I don't know. What do you think, Kaytlin?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen like, again, here's Ethan being so great. No, so Ethan was
we already know
wonderful
that.
when it came to me being pregnant. He thought it was the most beautiful thing in the world, which I did not. I was like the one that was like, this is awful, this is miserable. And I didn't even have bad pregnancies. So like, I really don't have room to complain as far as like, I wasn't sick, I didn't have all these things, but like, I just felt miserable. I hated my body. I didn't like what I looked like. There were just so many things. And so, just like you were saying, like, just be kind because she's going to know that her body is changing. Like, she doesn't need to be reminded of that, And so on the other side of the coin, I had a very kind, understanding one. I've heard of husbands that are like, oh, are you sure you should be eating that? Or, you're getting a little bit. And I'm like, seriously? Like, she's literally carrying your child
Straight to jail.
You're a jerk. Like,
yeah.
How do you treat your wife like that, who's literally sacrificing her body for the one thing you wanted, or at least at the time you wanted it, right? It's like, how can you do that? And how can you act like that? It just, don't be that guy. Yeah. Don't be that guy that makes pregnancy seem like, ew, like you're getting bigger, like I'm not interested in you. Like, be the one that wants her and be okay with being rejected if she doesn't want you at that time, right? Like, love her so much that she wants to reject you because, she doesn't need to be rejected by her husband when she wants to reject herself. So, yeah.
No, I want to add, you said that be the guy that is, or don't be the guy that acts like his pregnant wife is an inconvenience. Mm-hmm. I think that is a huge one. And I can only imagine what taking care of a pregnant woman is like, and awful. That it's not convenient at all. But I think like we can feel that if it, and we don't want that. So we'll suffer in silence, or as silent as we can bear it, to try not to be an inconvenience. And so, yeah, I think, yeah, those are good ones.
Yeah, that silent closet crying so we don't like affect anyone else.
Into a pillow.
Yeah. Oh man,
yep.
Those are tough times, but I'm glad that we all made it through that. And
barely.
I feel like that's just the big swell coming up. That's the pre-birth is just the swell, and then when you get to that 0 to 2 years, that's when that wave crashes. So there's even more care and love needed after the baby's here, because that's the recovery period, I feel like.
Yeah.
Which, Ethan, you want to take us into our next stage here?
So, like Kaytlin said, I'm kind of a freak, and the whole pregnancy stage was just awesome. But the next one, is different and challenging in its own ways, right? So the next one is the new father stage. So this is the baby stage. Um, let's kind of do a similar round, right? Start with some of the good things, and then we can kind of do the inverse of that. So Shannon, we'll start with you this time.
Okay, so kind of like pregnancy, except worse. She's going to pretend like she's fine, and she is not fine. Now, I think, first of all, your guys' episode on this made me sob because you guys have been through this many times, and you're understanding after doing it 4+ times. Um, of course, you know better than you did the first kid or the second kid. So that just comes with experience, I think. But also, as the mom, you like someone hijacked every part of your brain and your nervous system and everything. And there's so much pressure around being a mom, and you're supposed to know exactly what to do. I think also breastfeeding backs you into the corner of like, I'm the baby needs, and it's so isolating, and it's just so hard. And um Jared shared a story of one of my brother's friends. He was also my friend growing up, whose wife took her life due to postpartum psychosis last year. And it's there's only one person who's witnessing you in and out every single day, and that's the husband. And even then, you can really hide it. You don't know what's going on in her brain. So I think the biggest thing for this stage is education. Like, you need to educate yourself. You need to understand what postpartum depression is. Don't call it the freaking whatever, the baby blues. I This is not an explicit podcast, so I will not swear, but like, get that out of your vocabulary. The baby, that's the most minimizing thing for what this can be. And also know that it can last up to, what is it, 24 months after you have a baby, I believe. You could fall into postpartum depression or psychosis or other things like that. So I think that approaching that um, with knowledge rather than judgment or what you think she should be doing or thinking or feeling, I think that's really positive. Now, that's just as a husband side. I think as a dad side, also education. I think the more education you can do, the better, because she may know milestones to look for, or she may know, I don't know, sleep, how to sleep train. That's the phrase. But if you can educate yourself on these things, you are partners together, and being shouldered together, I think, takes the burden off. And also, I think the baby really benefits from that.
Can I just jump in there before Kaytlin goes? With This is something that I think I, as a husband, potentially could have done a little bit better, and hopefully not getting too personal for Kaytlin's sense, but especially with our last child, with our fourth, it was uh, like a year and a half afterwards, potentially, that I guess I was busy with work and trying to watch the kids and everything else, and uh, I guess I didn't realize until it was probably a little bit too late that Kaytlin kind of was on a downward spiral. She
To say the
kept
least.
yeah, she kept a great face, and it was, it was fine, and I guess I just maybe I just wasn't paying attention for it, or maybe it was like, oh, after the other three kids it really wasn't that bad, so I wasn't watching for kind of that serious just mental strain that comes along with all of the letting down of hormones and changing and everything else. And so I remember it all kind of came to a head. We were literally coming back from a week long vacation, and we were sitting in the car, and it was like a 6 hour drive, and we started having a conversation, and it was fine, and then it just kind of turned for the worst, and we got in this argument, and then I was just kind of upset or whatever, and then we didn't talk to each other for most of that whole trip. And then when we got home, we had this blow up conversation that I hope we had never had I don't even say it was like a fight. It was just like a breakdown for both of us, and we'd never had anything like that serious, and I hope we never do again. But I think me as a husband and a father, maybe I should have been better at knowing that this was a definite possibility, and maybe seeing some of those signs before it just was like, you know, to the explosion point at the end. So if I had any advice for fathers or whatever, even if you're distracted and you got a lot of stuff going on, maybe do like a, I don't know, like a every couple week check in and just kind of ask about these things. Maybe you don't know that maybe you don't know to talk about it. We could have had maybe 100 little arguments instead of one argument that is over 100. So I don't know. I just thought I that kind of resonated with what you said, Shannon. So thought I'd add that.
Well, I think with that, I love you guys for sharing that, and feel for that education and to that point, and everybody feels differently about this, but there's a lot of shame in taking medication for any type of depression, but specifically postpartum depression. There's so much shame around it, and really just internally. It's like, if I take medicine, I am an absolute failure. If I can't keep myself happy, then I don't deserve to be alive. Like, if I have to take drugs to make myself happy, then what's the point? Which is not true at all. But that is a lie that I know I told myself over and over and over and over again. And I personally should have been on medication after every single baby. That doesn't mean that you have to be on it forever, but I needed something to help me because I was not okay. And it wasn't until after the fact, where I was starting to come out of it, that it was like, oh, it was not a good time. It was a close call, so I think that as well, with the education, and you as a husband going to your spouse and not saying, hey, you seem like a psycho, you should get on drugs, but like, listen, and have that be a conversation when she's pregnant too. If you need medication, this is so common, and this is a tool to help you, just like getting an epidural. We're not having babies without drugs. And so let's do this. We need a little bit of support. And I think just approaching that in a really supportive way, I would have really benefited from that. And it's not that either one of us knew about that, or that would have helped, but that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Kaytlin, there's a lot there.
Yeah, it was rough. And I think the hardest thing was that, like, I mean, I think I had always had a little bit with like every other child, right? The first three, it was like, you're down, like you're just not feeling good about yourself. And I had kind of a history of a little bit of that anyway. And so it was like, how different could this be? But man, that fourth one, I don't know what it was, but it rocked my world. And like Shannon said, like, it had never even crossed my mind that I could ever take medication, because that's not what you do, right? Like, and again, like she said, that's actually not what you do, but you're a failure because you can't handle it. In your guys' other episodes, you talked about how, there are plenty of parents that talk about, well, they did it without this and this and this, and, they turned out fine. It's like, that's great. There were also tons of people that never recovered, and people wondered why they were just like angry mothers all the time, and why they were just kind of like awful to their children. It's like, there was probably other issues happening and they just never got resolved. So yeah, I think, and honestly, for any dads, new dads, future dads, like, it also may never even show up that that's not what I wanted to say. You may never even recognize it, and that's okay too. Like, she may never come to you and talk about it. You may never even realize it's happening. And that's not your fault either, because she may not even know what's going on. She just feels overwhelmed, and that's normal because you have a couple kids. And so it seems like that should be normal to feel completely underwater when you have, 4 under, I don't even know what ages they were, but it was like 4 under 6 or 4 under 8. I can't even remember. That it's okay if you don't recognize it. Like, you're not a bad father if you don't recognize that and don't notice that, because you don't know what you don't know. And until you go through it and see that, you're like, oh, that's what that was. But you also can't do anything unless she's willing to do something as well. You can talk to her, you can push her, you can do all these things, but until she is ready to recognize and see that for herself, it may not do any good. And unfortunately for a husband, right? Like, it kind of seems like there's nothing you can do, but just being there to support that until she's ready to like recognize, like, I need help.
So how do you think a husband should approach that situation? Let's just say, they're your wife has had a baby. You notice that as a husband, you notice that she's really, I hate to say it, but like, I don't want to be insensitive, but she's all over the place.
No.
She's left, and then one day she's super happy, and she's like, oh, I love this baby. I love, doing this. And then the next day she's crying and says she wants to move and wants you to change jobs and wants you to, and you're like, what is going on? So how does a husband like approach that with his wife to be like, hey, I've noticed that, without being offensive, but to say like, hey, I've noticed that you've been all over the place. Because a woman might not know. She might not know that her hormones are making her be all over the place. So in her mind, she thinks she's being totally rational and reasonable, when the husband's like, this is like bonkers. We're going all over the place.
Well, I think in her mind, it's her reality.
Yeah.
But she doesn't think it's normal. She knows, at least personally, I knew that my reality was that day to day, my moods were like this. I was sobbing. I was angry. I had no patience. I felt, so many big things. And that was my reality. So that was real to me. So I think a big part of that is starting the conversation before baby comes, having that be something that is an open communication. So it's like your fire plan. Like, if the fire alarm goes off in the middle of the night, you don't want to be telling your kids, oh, let's meet across the street at the mailbox. That's a plan that you put in place prior and set up a safe space. Now, I'm not guaranteeing that she isn't going to fly off the handle or cry or whatever, but I think that that having some things in place, but also having those conversations before, she feels like she can come to you with some of that a little bit more without so much shame. And there are just so many high expectations, and even admitting them out loud, like Kaytlin said, oh, I can't even handle being a mother. This is my entire reason for being alive. So if I fail at this, then, but I think she may not realize that she's dipped into this. It's not like you are a viewer of what's happening. Like, you are in it. And so the viewer is the spouse. And like Kaytlin said, it is, I needed to clarify that with our friend who lost his wife. He had no idea. And it wasn't because he wasn't attentive or loving or things like that. This literally, to him, came out of nowhere. And so that's how sneaky it can be. But I think having some sort of a fire plan is a good idea. But if you don't, maybe try to catch her in a good day, catch her in a moment where it's like, okay, how are you feeling? Let's have a check-in. What can I do to help? How's your mental state? And see what she says.
How would you say your mental state is?
On a scale of 0 to 10.
I don't think of myself as much as a fly. No, that's good.
Well, not only that, I think, like, so many decisions, and I say this with all the love in the world, so many decisions are made by a mom. The tiniest, most minuscule decisions are made every single day. And those little things build up to be so much more than we would even understand, like how many stupid little decisions are made in a day. That, the wonderful thing of saying, like, hey, how can I help you? I can't answer another question. I can't come up with something. I just need you to do. You know, you know how to change diapers, you know how to feed babies, you know how to bathe. Like, so taking some, and I'm saying, like, when this is at the extreme, right? When you can see that this is happening, because obviously we are going to have roles, and you've kind of agreed on those. And so it's like, well, why do I keep like doing all of your roles? But if you're seeing that this is kind of becoming an issue, that's what I'm saying, to bring some of these things. Like, if you just kind of take some of those responsibilities without being asked, and just kind of take those small menial tasks away from her, just to give her like a second to breathe, I think that's huge. Just taking those small insignificant tasks, but those things that build up to be so much of our lives and our days.
Yeah, I love that you guys have really focused on like helping the spouse in this stage of fatherhood. Really, it's a totally different dynamic. It's not just you and your husband anymore, or you and your wife from the guy's perspective. And so managing that relationship and being there in that dynamic period where there's a new person being introduced, I feel like you guys are really hitting the meat of what's important. I mean, change a diaper, educate yourself. I mean, that's the easy stuff. Change a diaper is no big deal. But learning how to communicate with your spouse, learning how to have that good relationship so that you can work together and the baby is not growing up in a home that's like contentious, or heaven forbid, a mother who's at the end of her rope and, she's feeling totally lost, or even worse than that. So I feel like this is critically important. And, the things that dad would need to know to manage a baby, are in some ways some of the easier things than what we're talking about here. So this has been good. Any last comments on this stage before we move on to the next one? Okay, so let's move to the next one, which is the hands-on stage. We got a lot of hands. We're still in all. Well, actually, this is 3 to 7. So we've got lots of kids that's still in this stage. Let's see, Kaytlin, what are your thoughts on the hands-on stage? Let's have you actually share the good and the bad, and then we'll go to Shannon. We'll have her do the good and the bad.
Okay, so kind of its name, be hands-on, right? Like let your kids be around you. Let them hang out with you. Just kind of be in all fatherhood. Being there is like 90% of the game, right? Like, it's just showing up and being there, and, doing a puzzle with them. Or, you guys talked about wrestling. What kid doesn't like wrestling? Boys and girls alike. We have a girl and she loves wrestling just as much as the boys do. And also a huge thing is realizing like how little these kids still are. Like, you're kind of getting up into your upper ages of like sevens, right? Where it's like, okay, these kids know better, right? Like, these kids, they're getting older, they know what they're doing, but they are still so small, and they are still so dumb, and don't know what's happening, and still making really dumb choices. And they're just little. And we need to let them be little, because I feel like the world outside of our own home is going to tear them down enough and make them be people that society thinks that they need to be, that just giving them a time and a place to be little and quirky and dumb and, make silly things happen in their lives. Like, don't break them. Mm-hmm. Like, just let them be little. And so I guess that was kind of like the good and the bad together of like, I don't know. Yeah.
I feel like the first
That's
two
good.
stages were really kind of like the maybe support your spouse stages, because kids are just basically, you're trying to get your kids to survive in the the 0 to 2. But yeah, this stage is really kind of the focus is really kind of turning to the kids. Obviously, as spouses, we should still support each other, obviously. But yeah, I like it. Shannon, what do you think?
I literally typed easy to expect too much here. They're still babies. I think that it feels like they've been around for a long time, especially your oldest one or two. Like, man, they've been around for 6 whole years. They're so big. And they are not. And I think every single family does this. And that's why oldest children are built different. Okay. We have to be survivalist because our poor parents just they have a way they think that they should do it and they're doing the best they can, and a lot of times they change their tactics later on because they're like, oh man, yeah, so we got to come with some unbeatable unbreakable spirits, or being really resilient. So I think remembering that, and it is such a different perspective. Our youngest is 4, he'll be 5 in November, and he is just my little buddy, and he is still a baby. And I just remember how I felt with our oldest at this age, and he drove me insane. He still kind of does, but I was like, why aren't you doing these things? I truly don't understand. And I think it's because it feels so long, and they should be older, or they look older, or I don't know. I think you're just ready for them to grow up. But then I don't know if you guys feel this way, but then you get to the youngest, and I never thought I'd be this way, but I'm like, oh, my baby. We're not in any toddler size clothes anymore in our house ever again. And that's a tiny bit sad. I mean, I'm so excited for them to get bigger, but I think just allowing them to be babies still, I think is really important. And I basically said, wanted to say the same thing. Pay attention with your kids. This is the age where they go to preschool, they start kindergarten, first grade. And I think setting up a precedent with your kids around school, being involved, know what's going on in their classroom, sign up to be a mystery reader, coach a soccer team, know what's going on, be on the list for the class emails, be involved, because that really sets the path. First of all, in supporting your spouse, you're not just saying this is your job, but you're in it together. And the more you are invested in this child. You want them to succeed, and if you're involved in that, then they have a way better chance of succeeding. A child that comes from a household with a mom and dad reading to them, doing sight words, asking about their tests, like that's just what greater advantage could you give a child? And to start them there at the beginning of their education, I mean, formal education, I guess. I think it really just sets up a really good path for everybody to get in the habit of doing that and being there.
Oh yeah.
And in reality, we have a very heavily male dominated family. Like, I know we have the one girl, but in reality, between the 4 of us, we have 7 boys and one. And at this stage,
7 boys and 1 girl. Sorry, you cut out a little bit. Yeah, 7 boys and 1 girl
yes.
between our 2 families. So lots of boys.
Yes. And so I feel like this is the age where the boys are no longer like mommy's little boys anymore, and they need and want dad. And so that's huge to you guys have always shown up, but if you haven't shown up in these first 2, this is your time to step up. This is your time to show face to them that you are a supportive dad. And yeah, that 3 to 7, mom's kind of out of the picture, and dad's they want dad.
Yeah, mom's just the lady who tells you to clean up. That's it.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And gets your snacks if you're out of them, right?
Yeah.
I read an article saying that some of people's earliest childhood memories are typically on vacations as children, and typically that's between that 3 and 7 years. If you think back to the earliest memories that you have, likely it's in that age range. And it's probably on vacation. So what we're trying to do is just go on lots of little vacations, a weekend here or a weekend there, or just to do different things and go to different places. If you go to the same place every time, it kind of just all blurs into one. So what we try to do is go to different beaches or go to different places in the mountains and just explore different things so that we can remember back to, oh yeah, I remember when this happened. Like on one of our last vacations, we went, it was like near Thanksgiving. We were walking up in the mountains, and McCoy, he was like the closest to the ground, and he saw a snake on the trail. He's like, a snake. And we were all like, what? He was the last one. We all looked around. There was a snake in the trail. And
he's still telling that story.
He's still telling. Oh, remember when I saw the
8 months
snake?
ago.
And I was like, yeah, that was really cool. So, those kind of things, building those memories with small vacations, small weekend getaways, and stuff like that, is really critical. So, thank you both. Those are great comments. Any further comments on that stage?
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good stage. So this next stage is the role model stage, which is from 8 to 12. We also have kids we both have kids in this range. So let's do the same thing. Let's kind of say you're good and you're bad, or you're good and you're inverse. I think we started with Shannon last time, so Kaytlin, we'll start with you on this one.
All right, so I wrote down be vocal in your love and your praise. I remember these ages very, very well, of like how I was, and I had a great dad, but he was not a vocal, loving person. I knew he loved me, like it's your dad, your dad loves you type thing, but he was not a vocal person. I mean, even to my mom, like that just was not who he was as a person. And I'm not going to knock him on that. Like, that's just how he was raised and everything. But I just think back and kind of those formative years and how I assume my growing up would have been changed if I had been told like how much he loved me, how much, or how proud he was of me for the things that I was doing, whether or not they were things that he enjoyed, but telling me he was proud of the things that I was loving and that I was doing. I think that would have made a huge change in my life, because I was so insecure in who I was at that age. And to be able to have something to like hold on to, like your dad or even your mom, right? Like telling you how much they love you, how much they love watching you do these things that you love, and that they're proud of you for those things. Like, I just don't think there's anything better than that, than to know someone is there for you at all times and they're in your corner, regardless of whether you're winning or losing or succeeding in whatever it is, but they're there and they're proud of you. And so then I guess on the opposite of that is, don't be too critical, because again, these are such formative years that when you're constantly being like told how you could do better and you're not doing this enough and you're not working hard enough and all these things, like how can you build yourself up? How can you be built up when you're constantly like being berated and being told you're not enough? Right. And so you have to be the opposite to be able to help these kids just build these self-esteems in order to be able to withstand everything that's going to be coming at them.
No, it's good. I think I heard somewhere for like kids this age, it's like for every one criticism, give them 3 compliments or something like that. Mm-hmm. I tried to do that when I was a soccer coach, and that was a lot. I was talking a lot because they needed a lot of correction.
Yeah.
Very good. Shannon, what are some of your thoughts on this one?
I totally agree with all of that. I have a little bit more on that for the next stage, so I'll save that, but continue to be involved. I really think that this is the age that your relationship is really solidified. And I think this is kind of the do or die stage. I think that if you age up, you will see the repercussions with the relationship with your child throughout their teen years. And they're old enough to understand stuff. Now they're funny. I mean, this age, I really enjoy. I really like when they hit 8, 9, 10. I love the humor, the sarcasm. they're still kids, so they're able to be silly and funny. But they're perceiving so much, and they know if you're treating them like an inconvenience. They know that, okay, well, mom doesn't want to spend time with me, so I guess I'll just go hang out in my room, okay? Or and they may bounce back and keep trying for that attention now, but that's going to end. And so I think really dialing in, I think that it takes a lot of parenting at this time and really being present. And that's a really hard thing to do, especially when you have a lot of younger kids. And though I do love this age, it can be taxing. I mean, hanging out with a 10-year-old boy is like, okay, can we stop talking about Minecraft, or Rubik's Cubes or whatever it may be? But like Kaytlin said, we try really hard to be interested in what our kids are interested in. And right now, Colton, we have 2 kids in this age. Our oldest, he is a man of many hobbies and talents. And so that bounces around, and I really relate to that. So whatever he's into, we try to really get into and support and be behind him. And so I don't want to snuff that out of him. So I hope that he carries that. But I mean, this is all what I'm assuming. This is what I'm trying to do. But again, it's the oldest child curse. I know that I should be doing this better, but I just sometimes just don't. And then I lay in bed and like, why did I tell him to go back up to his room? He just wanted to hang out. So hopefully that resilient oldest, and then we can just practice to our tender-hearted younger ones, maybe. I don't know.
And then your youngest one comes up to you and just wants to cuddle, and you're just like, oh, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
why?
sure.
Yeah, why are we like? I don't know why we're like this, but yeah, I think this is really critical. So yeah, stay involved, give them lots of attention. I love the praise, and that vocal support is so huge.
I heard, I think Caitlin and I might have talked about this, but there's like 2 different types of families. There's living room families, and then there's bedroom families. And it's like a living room family is a family that like the if you're in the living room, there's something happening there, whether it's kids doing something, or as a family, or whatever, or it's everybody just goes up and goes to their own bedrooms, and they just kind of spend their own time by themselves. Now, I'm not particularly going to say that one is better than the other. I would prefer a living room family. We just found basketball marks on our ceiling in our pass-through room, so I guess because the kids are playing basketball in the house, but wasn't too happy about that. But I mean, I guess that's kind of the living room area. So
if you just expect your house to be absolutely trashed, then your expectations cannot be missed. You got all those boys, man. Like our boys, like going up and down the stairs, they'll just like, the slide down the stairs. They'll get anything and slide down the stairs.
I don't know how they make so much noise. Literally, my kids weigh like what, a quarter of what I weigh, and it sounds like they weigh 2 tons coming down the stairs. I don't even know how they stomp that hard as they're coming down the stairs.
Oh man.
So I do have a story kind of going along with what we were just talking about of the being critical and the praise and everything. And so our oldest Nixon, he played basketball a couple seasons, and basketball is like my sport. That's what I played. That's what I loved. Like I played other sports and I loved other sports, but like basketball was my thing. And so when he wanted to play, I was like, sweet, this is going to be like, I'm so excited. And then I started watching 8-year-old basketball, and I was like, oh, I cannot think of anything worse than 8-year-old basketball. It was awful, absolutely awful. And so as the wonderful coach in me, after every practice, I told him everything that he was doing wrong and how he was doing awful and like all these things. And, I probably got like a praise in there every now and then, right? Like, but I was so critical. And it was because this was my thing. I needed him to be good at it. I needed to like live apparently vicariously through him in his 8-year-old basketball. And so when it came time to play basketball this year, he was like, no, I don't want to play. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. He was going to be trying lacrosse and stuff. And then I was sitting in my room one day and I just had like this aha moment. And I was like, holy, okay. I said, it's my fault. Oh my gosh, this was my fault. And so like, then it just started like coming all through me. And I was like, how did I let it get to this? Like, how did I let this happen? So my son got home and we were talking about basketball and stuff. And um, when they're like 12 years old, there's like another league that they can play with in our church. And so I was like, hey, you'll be able to play this. And he was like, no. And I was like, but why wouldn't you want to play? Like you're older, like you're going to get better. And so finally I was like, Nixon, can I talk to you? And he's like, yeah, sure. So he came into my room and I was like, it's like, I'm not going to get my feelings hurt like this. I just want to talk honestly with you. And I said, am I the reason you didn't want to play basketball? And like, you can just see the tears start like welling up in his eyes. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, ah, that like moment where you're like, I ruined my child.
Oh gosh.
And so I just started profusely like apologizing. I said, I am so sorry. I said, I never should have made you feel like you didn't want to play basketball. And so I just go on and I keep apologizing. And then, we kind of have like a finalizing moment. And I said, if I could promise you that the next time you play, it would be more praise and just excitement for you and less coaching, would you play? And he's like, oh yeah, for sure. And I was like, okay. I said, I'll work on that, bud. And it was just like the most like cut you down at the knees, like you be better. Like you just need to be better and stop being who you're being right now. So don't be like me.
Child,
Don't
they're
be like me.
parenting you.
Yes. So don't be like me and be better.
No, I would say the opposite.
In that regard.
Be like you in that you recognized it and then you were like, hey, I gotta correct this ship. You met with him, you apologized. Now your other kids are still, viable. Nixon's basically done, but no, I'm just kidding.
Hey,
No.
3 out of the 4.
There's hope for the others.
No, that's
Yeah.
great. I mean, that's actually very similar to something that, when these kids went to this tournament, these jiu-jitsu tournaments, and Weston, he's our
He's
6
6.
years old. I think he was 5 last time we did the tournament, though. And
Yeah.
he was like, he's out on the mat, and everybody's yelling kind of instructions, and I was his coach, and so I was trying to yell to him to just help him, to tell him what to do. But he's really never had anybody yell at him to do stuff like that before, and it's really loud in there, and it's just like everybody's yelling. I mean, when the kids are going, everybody's just like cheering and yelling, and if the coach wants to get in a word, he's got to like really yell. And so Weston was like, I don't want everybody yelling at me again. And I was like, well, I was kind of explaining to him, I was like, well, if I just whisper it like this, you're not going to be able to hear me because everybody's cheering for you. He's like, oh, yeah, that's true. And then I was like, do you want me to help you? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, well, then I'm going to have to yell. But he was like very self-conscious about that. He's like, well, I don't want to do it again because I don't want people yelling at me. And so I had to explain like why that was happening, but kind of funny.
Yeah.
But those are great. Well, you guys are sharing such great stuff. Let's hit this next one. So these are the critical teenage years where a parent goes from being a role model to no longer being a role model because dad and mom are lame and old. They're millennials. We're Gen
Millennium.
Zers. They're millenniums.
That was the most millennial thing you could say.
No, that was a
What?
boomer thing to say.
Yeah, it was boomer.
Yeah. Well, they're gonna think, oh, we're. I said millennials, not millenniums.
Oh, maybe you got cut out.
I
Sorry.
probably got cut out. That was absolutely what it was. So this guide stage, let's hear what your thoughts are on this one. Shannon, can you kick us off on this one?
Yes. So I have a theory. Now, this is very much theory. I want to add, I have a degree in child and family studies. And before I had any children, I was the best mother in the world. So take this with a grain of salt. Same, I don't have any teenagers, but I do vividly remember being a teenager. And I really try to take that into how I parent even our kids now. I was not a very happy teenager, and it was not all my parents' fault. And but I try to stay grounded in that. So my theory is that the teen years are where, and we start this earlier, but this is where it really comes in. We really need to figure out the difference between what our expectations are for our children versus their responsibility in being a human being. And so what I mean about that is, if you go to school, you have to fulfill your responsibility of like getting good grades. That's not my expectation. My expectation might be you need to have 100% on all of your tests. But your responsibility is that you need to pass this class. This is what's respectful. This is like your job. So those are two different things. And I think that the waters can get very muddy. And I'm speaking from my own experience. And this ties into the praise type of thing. The waters can get very muddy when you're parenting from a perspective of your expectations of your child versus the responsibilities they have in their own life. And so, for instance, I was a very smart child and smart ass, probably, I'm sure, but I passed. I mean, I got, I don't know, a 3.2 GPA. I'd never really studied. I got a really great score on my ACT. I was very smart, but I just, as my parents always said, I never applied myself. And that made me so angry. I would come home. I had mostly A's and B's. I was like, most kids have to work really hard to get this. Can you please just be happy? And that bled into a lot of how I felt as a teenager. And starting out life with that in your mind, that nothing you ever do is going to be good enough, especially that coming from your parents, I do not believe that that sets you on a very good path to having a good relationship with them in the future, or for you to be very successful as your own person either, because you are constantly trying to make decisions, either to rebel against what those expectations are because you're trying to have a little bit of control over your own life, or trying to meet them and failing because they're expectations that someone else has put on you. And so I think as parents, I'm not saying do not teach your children and hold them to the responsibilities that they have and that they've committed to or things like that. But I think that really being specific about, why am I teaching my child this? Is this because I expect this from them? Is this because this is what I think their life should look like? Because if that's the case, I don't think that's the best place to approach parenting. Now, do we have more experience as adults, as parents? Yes, but we are not them and we did not live their life. And we might think we can see their future, but I would like to submit that we don't, because they are different people than we are. And I've heard Jared say it several times, and it's kind of our motto that we have these seeds that are children, and we don't know what seeds they are. It's just our job to help them grow. And if we have a daisy seed and I'm expecting it to be a hydrangea, it's going to fail and it's probably going to wilt and it's not going to thrive. But if I recognize that it's a daisy and I help it be the best daisy that it possibly can be, then it will thrive. And then I have done my job rather than force it into being something that I thought it should be. And so that being applied to teenagers, I think is critically important, because constantly feeling like you're failing when you already are insecure and hormonal and unsure about anything, but you're trying to pretend like you have it all together. Getting that from your parents, it's too much. And I think it can be really, really damaging. So that's kind of I've been theorizing on this for a couple of days. So I'd love to hear thoughts.
We can grow daisies, but we don't grow pansies.
Hard to change that to a different flower.
Because the pansy is a type of flower, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I was like, I'm pretty sure it is.
I think that might be a slur now. So
Careful.
That wouldn't be my first.
I mean, there's no way I'm going to say it as eloquently as Shannon. Like that was, but mine essentially was give grace because kids, especially these ages, are just going to mess up a lot. And I think we need, again, I think we need to determine like what's worth punishing and what's worth just like saying like, hey, what's going on? Right. I was watching a video the other day that kind of talked about when is discipline needed and when is like discussion needed. And I really like that because again, I tend to be a little bit more, hammer on my children and just realizing like, maybe I just need to step back and be like, hey, what's going on? Like, because there have been many times when I kind of check my ego a little bit and it's not about me and I go to those kids that are struggling or appear to be struggling and they will open up and they will say like, yeah, this, guy was being a jerk at school today or my teacher was being annoying today and it's like, oh, okay, this explains why this like dramatic episode was happening when normally this is not a normal thing for you. So Shannon said it beautifully. Just give some grace. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that what you were talking about, both of you kind of talked about in expectations and grace, and either just setting those parameters on what is expected within your household. Right now, we're just working on trying to set the expectation of, eat with your fork, sit down at this on your bottom when you're at the table, because those are some of the expectations we have around mealtime. But as these kids get to be older and in their teenage years, I think the expectations, in my mind, I feel like a lot of those expectations will shift toward more like, you could call them virtues or virtues in the sense of like, is what you did honorable or is that honest? And you can measure the things against that, and then that's what we're trying to build is like, is what you did to this kid at school something that's honest, or is that bullying, or is that dishonest, or were you dishonest with me when you said that? And so it's more about, and then setting the expectations for the virtues that you want to build, or the creed, if you will. Then that way, a lot of your different behaviors can be set against those expectations. And obviously you'll have some specific expectations like a curfew, or like, you can't, if you have to drive, if you're going to drive, you need to do this, the X, Y, and Z. But I think some of the more nuanced things, those expectations can be virtues, so that, and you can discuss what does that mean? What does bravery mean? Does that mean fighting someone, or does that mean standing up for someone that needs to be stood up for? So just discussing these as a family can help set those expectations of what is expected from our family's perspective, and then as an individual, like what kind of person do you want to be? I think that's also kind of what you were talking about, Shannon, is like the individual, like human expectations is like, what kind of human do you want to be? And which of these attributes do you want to make your own?
Well, it's almost like, you want to teach your kids respect, right? And you teach them from the time that they're, tiny little children, that when they get to this age, you want them to be respectful because that's who they are, and not because they fear that they're going to get in trouble if they're not, right? Like you want it to become part of who they are instead of just doing it because that's what mom and dad are telling me I need to do.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where they get to practice. I think that is the other huge part of this, that I wish a little bit more that I had practiced in my teen years. Just the stakes are really just not that high. I mean, there's only a couple of things that you could do that can impact you forever. But even then, I mean, short of killing yourself or somebody else, I really just think that they are just little pretend adults that are still under our care, at least. And, maybe as adults, we have boundaries like this because we're smart enough, or our brains are developed enough to understand that. But as kids, it's just a little, we can help put up bumpers a little bit, but I mean, I think I hate even using the word mistake or messing up because it's just life. And And it's not about, oh, well, you made a mistake and that now that was bad and you need to make this right. I think it's like, well, what was the outcome of this? Was this your desired outcome? What kind of a person does this make you? And maybe some kids are really going to care about their grades. And you can have, if you called an expectation, I was just trying to differentiate, like, to be a responsible human being. I think that comes with having different virtues and things like that, versus what you think should be applied to all your children. All of my children will graduate with a 4.0 GPA because that's what Thomases do. I mean, no, that's
no, they
dumb. No, they don't.
You think
so, but all of them graduated high school. They are responsible students. They had their things turned in because that's responsibility. And I think that really being an adult, if you really narrow it down to it, it really is being responsible. And so anyway, it's just their time to practice. And so I would argue there's just not that much that would even need discipline. I think this is so much of a discussion thing. And I'm living in an idealistic world where I don't have any teenagers, and I am able to sit down and have really meaningful conversations with my teenage boys about what kind of person they want to be.
What's the saying? You just wait.
Oh yeah,
you just wait.
But I really think that just maybe what's in Freaky Friday, she says, lay off them, leave them alone. I mean, it's just, there's a lot going on in their heads. And I think that if we really just don't need to add to their pile-on. We're there as the guideposts and the little bumpers, but I don't know, let them crack. But
oh, sorry, you cut out the last piece. You said let them practice and let them fall on their face sometimes.
No, I said maybe I'm just naive.
Oh well. I think
so now that
go ahead, Ethan.
I was just saying, now that we've guided our children to perfection.
And the planes are off the ground.
Yeah, from 13 to 19. Let's get into the mentor stage. This is kind of 20 plus, right? These are full-fledged adults. They are making their own life decisions. Obviously, as parents, we're here for advice, but they don't have to listen to us anymore. So what are your thoughts on this stage? These will probably be shorter stages because it's a little bit out there, but Kaytlin, what do you think?
So I just kind of was thinking about it, and I said, take interest in the things that they're doing, whether it's school, whether it's trade, whether it's entrepreneurship, whatever it is that they're doing, and then give them as much guidance or as little as they want. There are going to be some kids that really talk through things with you, and there are going to be some that want to completely fail on their own, and that's okay too. Or completely thrive on their own, right? And I think just realizing, like, I don't really want to pay for all of my kids' college. We've kind of had discussion about whether or not, like, I want to be able to feel like I am so hands off that it's not like, well, you're using my money or you're, this type of thing. Like, I want to be able to just like release them from anything with me unless they want it from me. I don't want to feel overbearing. My parents were obligation. Thank you. My parents were so hands off to the point where I'm like, I wish you guys would have like directed me a little bit. And they're like, I don't know it was what you wanted to do. Like, what did we know what you wanted to do? And I was like, well, I didn't ever really talk to them about it. Right. And I just kind of lived my life, but I do appreciate how much my parents, like, once I was graduated, it really was just kind of like, you're an adult, do your thing. And I appreciated that a lot.
Yeah, it's good. I think that, I think that different kids need different help or not help or whatever. And I think that like you said, as a parent, they're on a different path. They're in a different age, not just by age. I mean, a different era of the world, in that it's a very different world that you left and you went to college in than when they went to college in back in the 80s or whatever, or in the 70s. And it's just like, there's careers that exist today that never even were imagined back when your parents. So in some ways their advice is old, in some ways that wisdom still carries through. But, So you got to kind of find your own path, and being that mentor is allowing them to do that, and realizing that you don't know everything, and maybe the world has changed. But Shannon, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think that this is the stage to be the biggest cheerleader. I love that. Be interested in what they're interested in. I think to that point, the world is different. So this is a really good opportunity for you as you are getting older as the parent to learn from, this kind of next generation about technology, or you guys kind of talked about that in this episode. Just you have a really good opportunity to learn from them. And I think that they really enjoy teaching you for once, and being humble enough to be taught by them, I think is really important. I kind of have a different perspective. I still think that this, especially college age, I still kind of view that a bit as some practice. You're not fully responsible. Some people get married and have a family. Most people don't. And so it still is this kind of, you're taking courses and you're learning and you're making decisions, and you might try something and not get into it. I think that the way that I was raised was that there was a very specific path, and that I had to do all of these things to be on this path. And I wish that I could have explored the world outside of that path a little bit more when the stakes were not so high, because I can't explore the world now. I can't go travel the world and see China or Japan right now. I mean, I could if we took out a second mortgage, but it's not the same. And that's the only time in your life, theoretically, when you are young, you are not a child, but you do not have very many responsibilities to just learn. And I know, Kaytlin, you were a little bit older than I was when you got married. But I mean, we're both still very, very young. And I'm not saying that is neither good nor bad. And I'm also not saying that I wish that it wouldn't have been that way. But I think that as a parent, speaking to our children in this time, I think that allowing them the space to try things. Maybe they don't go to college. Great, cool. You want to go work right out of high school? Awesome. You want to go apprentice to be a plumber? Awesome. You want to go take a year off and go travel? I mean, I'm not going to pay for it. So if you want to go do that, go do it. But I will be here cheering for you, and I want to get a postcard. Being a cheerleader at this stage of life is so vitally important. And rather than like, well, these are the expectations, this is what your 20s have to look like, so come on, get to it. There is good and bad in everything, and everybody's going to have their own path, and every kid's going to have their own path. And I'm not also trying to put my own expectations onto them about, what I wish I would have done, or what I wish my experience could have been, but to be open to them having a different experience than I did, and then just cheering for whatever that is. I think it's so awesome that we are raising our friends. And I really, really believe that. I think that this is the stage where a lot of that parenting pressure, like Kaytlin said, pressure, you know what? Now we're buds. Now you can come to me and I will just be cheering for you. I will always have a home for you. If you ever need to be at home, I am here. I am your cheerleader. I will love you and support you no matter what. So explore, like, the world is your oyster. What a gorgeous time to be a parent. I think this is like a payoff. So.
No, true.
As we were talking, I was reminded of a commercial that I saw one time. And it was like this, she was probably like her late 20s, maybe like 30 years old, this lady. And it was, she was at her parents' house, and it was like after Thanksgiving or something. And she was standing next to her dad by the kitchen sink, and they were washing dishes, and they were just talking. And she goes, "Dad, can I ask you for some advice?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course. Anything." And she goes, I'm just not sure. Should I max out my HSA this year, or should I put into a Roth IRA? And should I put all my money into a target date fund, or should I go just mutual funds or whatever? Asking like financial advice. And her dad looks at her and he goes, "Well, sweetheart, uh, it's not always the camel that has the biggest hump that makes the largest step in the desert." And she's like, and then like the commercial like cuts, and it's like, some parents give great advice, but not on every subject. And it was just like, it was like her face was just like, what the heck was that? Like, I need answers, right? And so, hey, sometimes we don't have all the answers as parents, and you know what? Sometimes our parents don't have all the answers. But I think at that stage, it's kind of grace goes both ways, and we're just all just still trying to figure life out, even as you know parents of older 20-something, 30-something-year-old kids.
Yeah. Very
all right,
good.
let's
We've got one stage left.
Yeah, let's get into it.
And this is kind of a overlapping stage, so a lot of times it's still mentor, but this is a newer one where you become a grandfather. So the grandfather stage, and this is obviously later in life when your kids are having kids. So can each of you share some of your thoughts around grandfathers and what a grandfather should do? Let's start with Kaytlin.
My biggest thing is show up. That is the only thing I wrote down. That's the only thing grandkids need from you, is to show up and be there and love them. Like, I was never really around my grandparents much. They lived far away from me. But when we were there, they were there. Like, they were taking us to go to the carousel. They were, going outside on walks with us. They were doing crossword puzzles with us. Whatever it was, like, when they were there, they were there. And like I said, I saw them maybe twice a year, but I loved it. And I soaked in all the time I could with them. And that's what I want for my kids as well, with my parents, with, Ethan and Jared's parents. Like, all our kids want is our grandparents to be there. So.
Mm-hmm. I remember when Kaytlin's grandma died, Grandma Yule, or Grandma Lola. It was probably maybe like 6 years ago.
Yeah, I was pregnant with Henley.
And we went out. This was in Montana, and we actually were out in Idaho for family reunion, and so we drove up to Montana for the funeral, and we had the funeral and everything, and a lot of Kaytlin's cousins were just really kind of reminiscing, because a lot of them lived next to Grandma Lola and grew up next to him, and they were like, "Oh, I remember, every Tuesday we'd go down to the river and go fishing and this and that," and they were just like kind of spitting off all these things that they used to do with. I remember Grandma we used to catch fish and cook them on the river, and then we'd have picnics here and there, and Kaytlin was like, yeah, whenever we were there, we did fun stuff with them, but she was like, man, I don't have like that many memories with them. Like, I wish I would have had more of those memories. I remember you said that to me. You're like, man, I wish I would have been able to experience that with my grandma that my cousins did.
And I do feel like some of that is because I was the youngest one, like the youngest cousin on that side, that most of my cousins are 20 years plus older than me. But yes, it was kind of like, oh, my grandpa used to take my cousin skiing every week on like a cheap day or something like that. And it was like, man, like, I wish I would have had those things, because my other grandparents died by the time I was 3. And so it was like, I really only had my one grandma for most of my life.
Yeah, I think that in the past maybe 50 years or so, as people have kind of become more mobile around the country, they're not living next to their grandparents anymore, and so a lot of these relationships with that next generation, in many cases, in more modern times, is not there, because people will move to another state to get a job, or you don't just stay where you were born your whole life. So those relationships often are the ones that are broken because the grandparents aren't moving anywhere. Although some grandparents do chase their kids around the country, I do know that.
That's true.
Or just because they want to be near their grandkids. Shannon, what are your Kaytlin? Did you have any other thoughts there? Or okay,
Nope,
Shannon,
that
what are your thoughts there? Thank you for that.
I totally agree. I had a set of grandparents that lived a 2-day drive from us all growing up. And I kind of just took it for granted that they kind of were always around. And it was when my grandma died at her funeral, I sat there thinking, every single thing in my life, my grandparents were at. Like they made this effort to drive out to see us for choir concerts, for championship games, for big life events, graduation, all sorts of things.
They would
And
drive. They would drive 2 days to come out and see this?
2 days.
Oh,
They lived
okay.
in Reno and we lived in Colorado, and that's a 2-day drive. You'd have to drive 1 day to Utah, and they'd usually make a big trip out of it, and they liked road tripping. But I obviously, as a kid, you don't realize the effort that takes. But as an adult, it was like, man, they were at everything. And I never realized how much effort that took and how much that meant. Like they were a part of my childhood. They were there. And that means so much to me now as an adult. And as a kid, it was just so nice to have other people to rely on, to love you. And so totally show up. I think that it's really important in this role. And again, speaking in this role, I think it's easy to forget that, like, it's not about you. And I'm talking about the older generation. I think that your life can continue, but you are not the center. I think right now we are the center of our children's lives, of our lives. And there is a shift that happens that it's not about you. And it is about them. It's about their family. And like I said, you can continue to live your life, with your older friends or whatever, with your spouse. But when it comes to your children and their families, their spouses, their whoever, then it's kind of about what they need from you. And it's not about what you want from them. It's not about what you need from them. It's not their job to make you happy, all these things. I know there's a lot of issues with our generations, I think, right now that are kind of coming to light about this type of dynamic. But showing up just with open hands, what can I do? And I also think that offers go a really long way. Because if you have people, I think we're probably all in the same camp. I don't really enjoy asking for help. I am very self-sufficient and I never want to put anybody out. And so an offer like, hey, tell me a Friday, I can come watch the kids. You deserve a break. I don't care what you're doing. It's not because you have some important appointment you have to go to or some, once in a lifetime thing. It's just, hey, you guys deserve a night out. Let us take the kids, or whatever that might be. I think that, and I want to remember that so much. You have so much power as a grandparent. You really do. You have so much power to influence, or not influence, but to just be there and impact lives for good. I have a friend whose mom lives near, and her mom literally watches her kids, picks her kids up from school 3 days a week so she can work. I mean, and the way that woman is involved, and I'm not saying that every grandparent needs to do that by any means, but just imagine the positive impact that you have as that grandparent on their lives still. And not because you're smart or you have all this wisdom, but because you can stage where they need the most help. It's so hard and tiring and burnout, and we need support and a community, a little village. And I think that is also just a really special role that you can have. And also it's great because you can say, all right, I'm going home to my quiet house now. Goodbye. And you've earned that. So I think that is such an honor to be in that role.
Excellent thoughts. I totally agree with both of you. It's being grandparents a different kind of being a different kind of parent, and also, watching the kids by saying, hey, can I come watch the kids for an evening while you and your husband go on a date? You're actually helping 2 generations. You're spending time with your grandkids, and you're relieving a stress valve for your own kids. Maybe
and you're helping yourself.
Yeah.
Grandparents that
Yeah,
spend time with their
and-
grandchildren
yeah.
live longer, and they are happier. Like that
Yeah.
is proven science. So
Yep.
it really is selfish.
Yeah. And yeah, you get to help just spend that time and love those grandkids. So that's great. Well, overall, I think and specifically, this has been a great conversation. We've loved to hear your perspectives on these things, these different stages. So important to change how we're acting, change how we're parenting as we go on. If you were to keep we do see this in our regular lives that some parents never get out of that guide stage. They just they don't step aside and act as a role model. They just keep trying to guide their kids their whole lives, or and even some places they're just so hands-on, they're so in the weeds in their kids' lives that the kids are like, back off, I need some space. And so it's important to step into these different roles as time goes on so that your kids can healthily grow up to be self-sufficient adults on their own and be successful and find their own successes in the world. So, Ethan, did you have any other final comments?
No, I would just say, let's do this again. This was fun.
This was fun.
I don't know why it took almost 200 episodes to get both of our wives on the podcast together, but yeah, Jared and I will definitely find another excuse to do this again.
Yes. Well, Shannon and Kaytlin, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and for our listeners, let's build that creed together.
All right. Thank you both.